Hi everyone, my name's Aisling McGovern and I'm the Home Retrofit Consultant for National Injection in Sheffield. I'm going to be very quickly taking you through our Retrofit Hub projects today. So you can see our 8 strategic aims on the board there, but basically the 3 hubs are currently funded by Skipton Building Society. There's Ariane and Tom in Burnley, Dan and Ibrahim in Oldham, and Gavin and myself in Sheffield. You can see us all up there. We're all working to increase the successful uptake of retrofit measures in areas with high levels of fuel poverty. And we're aiming to do that through building awareness of retrofit and its benefits, offering end-to-end support throughout the whole process, and making retrofit more accessible generally as well in the areas. What that looks like for each hub is slightly different because we have different communities with different needs, different local installer ecosystems, and different grants and resources available to each of us as well. So probably the best way to explain what we do is through a case study. So this is a family that live literally a 5-minute walk away from the Sheffield hub. I met the mother of the family in a local community centre in a chai and chat group. So this is where women in the area get together to do some crafts and just be in a warm space once a week. It was quite an unusual way to meet her because she doesn't actually speak much English and she doesn't speak the same language as anyone else in the group either. But luckily, when I was talking about our project, she understood the word insulation somehow and was able to communicate with me that she's basically not happy with her house and wrote down her address for me to come and visit. So I went to the home visit with one of our winter warmth support packs from NEA, and it's probably one of the coldest houses I've been in. The parents were walking around in big winter coats and woolly hats just to walk around the house, and they took me through to their dining room, which was absolutely covered in black mould, all on the ceiling and all over the walls as well. When we were talking, you could literally see your breath in there. It was that cold. It was like a fridge. It was so freezing. So I got to talking with the daughter, who is fluent in English, and she explained that they've not had a working boiler for years in the house, and they just didn't know what they could do about that, which, to be honest, is not an uncommon situation that we find. There's lots of people that are still living without working central heating in their home because they don't know what they can do. So we got to talking about lots of different resources that National Injection have, as well as the local grants, and they decided they'd like to go ahead with the Eco4 grant. So we applied to that through a local installer. We had an installer come out to do an assessment, which the daughter asked me to be there for with her parents, and they sent over a design. Sorry. The design stage with the hubs is important for 2 reasons. So firstly, we're able to talk through the measures with the family. So people really appreciate having that third-party independent advice to talk about what they've been offered, which in this case was loft insulation, internal wall insulation, a heat pump, solar panels, and also ventilation upgrades as well. We're able to talk about the measures and the benefits that they have, and also discuss the installation process and potential behaviour changes as well, which help to prevent issues down the line. We also are able to check over the paperwork that they're given, and in this case, I realised that on their design, that freezing fridge dining room at the back of their house had been completely left off receiving any measures. This is because they put it down as a kitchen because there was 2 kitchen units in the room. So in the grants, they don't internally insulate kitchens or bathrooms because of the costs and the risks of removing things like kitchen units. But after speaking with the family and the installers, we were able to use some of our funding that we have from Skipton to completely prepare that room for insulation. So it's now fully insulated, connected to the central heating system, and they have a new kitchen unit in there as well because the old one was so damp it just fell apart when we pulled it out. We can also visit during the install, which people quite like us to do. So we've got a range of experience in the hubs. I used to be a retrofit installer myself. So sometimes householders like me to be there to talk for any concerns that they're having, and if necessary, bring that to the installers on their behalf. I find that a lot of people feel because they're being offered the measures for free, they don't think they can speak out and complain or bring up any worries because it's like being ungrateful, which of course I think that if an installer is being paid by the government or being paid by the householder, you should still feel you are getting the same quality of work. Ultimately, that helps prevent system failures down the line as well. Then we have the handover stage. So the installers do a handover, but we also do our own handover. We have the Recite Me function on our website, so we can download and print off resources in the family's first language for them. But also we can talk about things like the Smart Export Guarantee for solar panels and the heat pump tariff as well, which oftentimes installers don't take the time to talk through. The handover from the installer for the heat pump for this family was actually scheduled during my time off. So I came back to find out that they had handed over the heat pump to just the parents, who obviously don't speak much English at all. So I rearranged that for them at a time when the daughter could come and translate for the family. It's just things like that that can slip through, where installers are rushing to finish a job and families don't feel empowered to ask for what they need. That can cause problems down the line as well. Aftercare, so we regularly schedule check-ins, but we also are based in the community, so we quite often bump into the people that we work with. So just last week I spoke to the sister-in-law of this woman, and she said that she used to always come to our house shivering and complain about how cold she is, and since the install she's not done that once. Sorry, I'm a bit shaky. This is not like my usual day job, as you can see. So I've got a few broad learnings on the board there, but basically the basis of the hubs is the idea that retrofit happens to people, not just their homes. The grants should be quite a good tool to help combat fuel poverty, but we need to build trust in them and also be protecting people through the process. When we think about the case study, could people in that situation or similar get the same experience and the same outcomes through something like an online portal or an advice phone line? Would they know to start at all, considering that they've been living for years with a broken boiler, not knowing what to do? We're told time and time again that the process is too complicated. So I've actually had someone who's tried to go through it by themselves describe it to me as torturous. They found it that bad. And we're constantly told that they couldn't have done it without us, whether they wouldn't have known where to start or they just would have given up halfway through. We also find people in fuel poverty take time to build trust. So it really helps to be in a place that they recognise, around people they know, like a community centre, or even being able to come to their home and seeing problems they're dealing with firsthand that they otherwise might not feel comfortable talking about. When you take the case study again as an example, that house has quite a low energy rating, so they did get a lot of lead generators knocking at their door, but who is really going to trust a random stranger at their door offering to do free work on what is probably your most valuable asset? We also find that trust is being undermined by poor behaviour from professionals in the retrofit industry. So we obviously all know about the dodgy installs, but also none of the hubs have seen a retrofit coordinator speak to the family or come to site. So for those of you who don't know, this is the person that's supposed to be overseeing the entire project. How can we really expect to see quality maintained if this vital person is taking a back seat? The hubs are trying to help with this situation by being present with the families and advocating for quality on their behalf. And we're also able to look over all paperwork that they receive and make sure they've got the right protections in place. We also find that people in fuel poverty often have more pressing needs they need addressing first. So that might be something like fuel bill debt, which our energy advisors can help with, or it might be problems like damp remediation or broken windows, which the grants very rarely have the time or the funding to deal with. So that's our project. If you'd like to speak more about any of it, please come and find myself or any of my colleagues, and we'd be happy to have a chat with you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So before we start talking about the Warm Homes Plan, just to say that I work on the Hubs project, so I'm the Director of Homes at NEA, and I'm incredibly proud of it, but it's also, you know, having worked in this area, not directly installing, but on the policy side for 15 odd years, we still get stories every week that I am sort of shocked and amazed by. So, you know, do remember this spotlight session throughout the next day and a half and think, you know, we're talking about policy and delivery. Think about that sort of scenario and how that fits into the policy framework. The other thing I just wanted to say, which is a slight aside, but also a still potential issue in this sector and perhaps other sectors, is Aisling and Ariane, despite being very qualified in retrofit, still get sort of sexism that they encounter on a almost daily basis of installers basically telling them they don't know what they're talking about. So, that definitely is something that we're going to have to tackle in the sector in order to progress. But let's talk about the Warm Homes Plan. So I've got 3 speakers coming in a moment, and basically everything I was going to say has been covered this morning. So I'm trying to think of something different to say. So first of all, I would just echo how it's brilliant that we've got it, right? Because Jess Skilbeck from Desnes spoke at our conference in Cardiff in start of October. And at the start of the day, her notes said it's going to be published on X date. And during the day, she found out that it was no longer on X date, but it was soon. And that was I think the 3rd delay. And also, I had by that point invited her to speak at this conference. And she said, I'll say yes for now, but I won't confirm until it's done. And one of the first things I thought about in this new year was, Jess still hasn't confirmed. When is this bloody thing coming? So we've got it, thankfully. And the focus has been justifiably about the big amount of money, right? And yes, it is a big amount of money. As Adam has said, that is not an easy amount of money to spend. And there is no precedent of spending that through local authorities. For the last 30 years, or actually since the early 90s, supplier obligations have been the biggest delivery vehicle. So this is a big change. The thing that got slightly overlooked was the PRS sector. We've already talked about it today. Actually, based on Desnes modelling, that's going to be the biggest contributor to that 1 million homes out of fuel poverty, about 450,000. Again, as has been talked about, a big part of that's going to be the compliance and enforcement, because actually getting those F and Gs to E's is a tiny proportion of now, getting the E's and D's to C's. How are you going to enforce that? Because what we've seen is that compliance and enforcement up to now has not been great, and it's complicated. So it's not that local authorities don't want to do it, and even if they have staff to do it, there is just complexity. One thing I don't think was picked up, which I'd like to reflect on, is yes, it can be enforced, but what's going to happen with the tenants? So again, people have talked about in the past, will rents go up? There's not actually that much evidence that they will. But if you build enforcement around the tenant being active in that enforcement, you potentially create conflict between the tenant and their landlord. If that tenant is in a vulnerable situation, that conflict could get difficult. It's a precarious situation for private renters a lot of the time. So that's going to be a particular challenge. Moving on, so usually people go, oh, it should be fabric first, fabric fifth, whatever, no fabric, lots of fabric. It's partly irrelevant. You've got to focus on the person and the home. And actually, part of the rhetoric has been, it's the right measures for the right home. Great. So I think we can all agree with that. However, there is a strong theme of PV, battery, heat pump. Again, good. One of the things I was reading yesterday on the way up here, we've got some excellent insights. Our insights team produces fantastic data and dashboards to look at. 18% of our clients who have essential medical equipment that needs to run permanently or semi-permanently turn it off because they can't afford to run it. 18%. I mean, that of all the statistics were startling, but that one I thought, wow, okay, there you see the link to health very immediately. But also, I thought, okay, well, the battery is a massively positive thing here, because you can charge that battery when it's cheap, and hopefully those people can then use that medical equipment throughout. So that, that's a massive positive. However, they've got to be able to charge it cheaply. So a lot of the benefits that were highlighted in the plan are based on effective use of time of use tariffs. Again, that's reasonable, and actually the assumptions DESNZ used, which I like to scrutinise, I thought, okay, I'm not going to pick them up on any of this. They were reasonably conservative about the PV, east to west, which types of time of use tariffs people are going to use. But there is a bit of uncertainty, and I've talked to people who've tried to sort of model this in the private sector, and they're not massively confident about what's going to happen with time of use tariffs. So you've got energy, so we're in this strange situation. We've got very high prices, but we've got massive debt, and we've got energy suppliers who maybe counterintuitively are not actually making much money. So you've got large energy suppliers losing money. Again, the data's not great, but I think most of the time of use tariffs, certainly the ones that have been at the innovative end, have been loss leading. So how is this going to work in future? And a lot of the benefits are going to accrue from effective use of the time of use tariffs, which could become volatile. If you've got energy companies going out of business, that's going to cause volatility in that market. And that necessitates quite a lot of engagement for someone to then pick the best time of use tariffs if there is all this volatility. And almost inevitably, what's going to happen is that the people who've got one or two EVs are very digitally engaged and enabled are going to benefit most, not our client base necessarily. So that's something very specific that I'd like to sort of look out for. Warm Homes Agency, Ian mentioned this, there's a lot of potential complexity there. I mean, when I wince when government is creating new bodies. By the way, I worked in government for 20 odd years. They're bringing together staff from 3 different organizations, and there are complexities around that. So how quickly will that happen? You haven't necessarily got the advice expertise for households in any 3 of those organizations, being Salix, DESNZ and Ofgem. However, on the positive side, we can influence. People in this room have that expertise. They can influence the Warm Homes Agency. And actually, what is heartening is that DESNZ has definitely looked at international examples. So the Irish model is cited. Abby, who's coming to talk later, also will talk about some other international examples. So it's good that we're outward looking as a country at models that work. Devolution, the elections have been mentioned. We've got big elections in Wales. We've got the local elections, general election. That again will add to volatility, potential differences in policy in different areas. So devolution in principle a good thing, but again for different households that creates potentially more complexity. Again, comes back to that localized advice to overcome it. Finally, again, area-based schemes have been mentioned. In principle, great, but actually what does it mean? What on the ground, what is area-based? So our Oldham hub recently got a list of the properties that have been selected by Greater Manchester to be treated in Oldham over the next 3 years. So they have understandably prioritised the IMD first and second decile income deciles. That's the easiest way of really targeting the local grant. But that's 3 streets in Oldham over 3 years. What happens to people not in those streets. So that's something to think about. Do you need an area-based approach which encompasses picking certain streets alongside having a certain amount of money left aside for people in crisis, people who come forward during that 3-year period or whatever it is. Again, coming down to local approaches and having the capacity to help the people that we're all trying to help in this room. So I will now introduce Jessica Skilbeck. She, as I say, has spoken at our Wales conference before. I'm sure she's both exhausted, relieved, and very excited to have this published. And as I say, having been on the other side, do know how difficult it is to get these sorts of things with their inherent politics out. So Jess is going to give us an overview of, in fact, I'll invite all of them onto the stage, but we will start with Jess giving us an overview, followed by Abby from EST, and then Sara Edmonds from the National Retrofit Hub. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Andrej, and thank you very much, NEA, for the invitation here to speak. All that Andrej just said is true about previous visits to your conferences in Liverpool earlier in the year and in Cardiff. I can honestly say that nobody is happier than me that we have published before today. It's really great to be able to speak to you about it. And it's a cliche, but it doesn't mean it's not true, that coming to these events is a really important reminder for people like me that work on policy in government. It's a much more direct opportunity to hear from people like you who interact day to day with people whose lives are affected by the work that we do, and it's really important that we do hear that directly. And absolutely, as Andrej said, you absolutely have the opportunity to influence what we're doing, both as a collective. Adam has been very involved in the work developing the plan, but also individually. Do come up and talk to me today. There's other colleagues here. We want to hear how it's working in practice. I am going to give a little overview just for sort of 5 minutes or so. You may well feel that you have read the plan, that you're sort of familiar with it all, but I thought there would be benefit in kind of hearing directly. You can listen for the emphasis that I give certain elements, and you can also kind of compare and contrast with what the Minister might say tomorrow. Listen for any differences. And then I'll talk for a little bit. There's a slide at the end, which I suspect you'll be most interested in, which is the next steps. So not just how we've got to this point, but what happens next through to 2030 and beyond. And then I'm very happy to get into the panel discussion with the others today. And unlike in Cardiff, I promise not to run off to speak to the Secretary of State before the end. So looking forward to it today. So the graphics will be familiar to you from the document. I've got some copies in my bag. And the headlines also should be familiar to you now. So the Warm Homes Plan, it's been a long time coming. We're absolutely delighted to have it out in the public now. What we wanted to do was to set a long-term direction for this Parliament and beyond, with a focus on bringing down energy bills for everybody. So building on the £150 that was taken off bills at the budget in November, but also beyond that. And then bringing that together with the work that we do to decarbonise the building sector, and that's primarily about the heat transition, moving away from gas, but also bringing in the use of, as Andrej said, solar PV, particularly to bring down people's bills. I'll talk a bit more about it in a minute, but it's very much envisaged as a plan for everybody, as well as a focus on the people who I suspect you're most interested in, those in low-income and vulnerable households, and within the legal definition of fuel poverty. And I'm absolutely sure that I'm not telling you anything new in saying that the work on the fuel poverty strategy and the Warm Homes Plan very much should be seen as kind of sister publications alongside each other. We did confirm the £15 billion of public investment. It's a lot of money. It's the biggest public investment going into home retrofit, and there are challenges about how we're going to spend it. I'm sure we'll get on to discussion of that in a minute. But we absolutely shouldn't focus solely on the public spending and forget about the implications of the new regulations in both the social and the rented sector. And I would say, probably sort of, you know, I love all my children equally, but I'm really proud that we got through the rental sector regulations in the private rented sector. Again, it's a policy that's been a long time coming. To my mind, it is probably the element of the plan that will make the single biggest difference to the people that you work with. Some big numbers in the plan. So the plan fulfills the manifesto commitment to upgrade 5 million homes. Alongside the fuel poverty strategy, the policies will lift 1 million households out of fuel poverty, and as Andrej said, a lot of that will be done by the regulations alongside the public spending. We're looking to triple the number of homes with solar PV and get to a point where we're installing 450,000 heat pumps a year, and that's out of a boiler replacement rate of just north of 1.5 million. So it's really significant market change, and I'm sure this is something that the Minister will refer to, that there are lots of economic co-benefits that we're looking to see, so looking to create high-quality jobs all over the country. We talk in terms of 3 groups of interventions. So I've mentioned it earlier, but thinking about the universal offer, and this is more targeted at the able-to-pay sector. So we confirmed funding for the boiler upgrade scheme at £7,500 towards the installation of a heat pump. And contrary to some of the speculation in the press over Christmas, we're not changing the eligibility for that scheme. So the budget rises each year, and it builds on the record numbers of installations that we have seen this year on both heat pump and solar, actually. We're looking to complement that in the able-to-pay sector with a new consumer loan offer. And this is about bridging the residual gap between what's covered by the boiler upgrade scheme and the cost of smart tech installation. We're very much working with the finance sector to do that. Again, some people in this room might have been involved in discussions, looking to bring that forward next year. And then we'll shortly be launching a call for evidence on the use of, in the jargon we call it CDEL FT, so it's lending from government. We've got some ideas about how we might make use of this money. So, for example, it's things like helping finance solar on gain share arrangements in the social housing sector, but we're interested in other ideas. And again, this is an area where if you've got projects that you think could make use of this funding, it'd be good to hear from you now and afterwards. So that's the first pillar. The second pillar is confirmation of £5 billion of investment for home retrofit for low-income households. And I'm sure you'll have picked up that here there's a balance between the pace of reform and maintaining delivery in the shorter term. So we took the decision to put the additional capital funding through the Social Housing Fund next year. And then we're going to be working to integrate what's currently Warm Homes Local Grant and the Social Housing Fund, evolve them, broaden them out. We're particularly conscious of the impact of the cessation of eco for low-income owner-occupiers, with a view to, as has been mentioned already, more of an emphasis on area-based approaches later in the Parliament. And then I've referred to it already, but just very pleased that we were able to issue the government response for the private rented sector minimum energy efficiency regulations. You'll have seen that we have made some changes to the policy, listening to the responses to the consultation, things like the implementation dates, cost cap, some of the exemptions, and I would say that we got a positive response from both landlord and tenant groups, which I very much took as a sign of success. The government response for the social rented sector will be coming soon, but you might have picked up as part of the funding for affordable housing, the commitments have been made about the metrics that will be required in 2030 and beyond. And all of that is underpinned by the work to reform EPCs, and beneath that, the home energy model, again, part of the package of consultations and responses that was put out a couple of weeks ago. So I'm not going to go through in lots of detail. I suspect we'll get onto it in discussion, but I've very much heard the questions being asked about the role of the Warm Homes Agency. UK is a bit of an outlier in not having a dedicated government agency in this space, and what we're looking to do is to consolidate functions that are undertaken currently in Ofgem, Salix and the department, to work with local partners, to have a much stronger emphasis on the role of advice and information, and I'm sure there'll be questions on that today, and I'll come on to it, but also a stronger focus on improved oversight of the consumer protection regime, which goes to the point about trust, which comes up repeatedly in these conversations. I won't dwell on it lots today, but there's continued support for heat networks, both new heat networks, the zoning requirements that will support them, and also cleaning up current heat networks. And I'm sure lots of you might have picked up, I think it was last week, the improved protection for consumers that's coming into force there. I think it's perhaps a sort of slight, it's an area that's not prominent in the public debate, but the role of sort of the intersection of heat networks and low-income vulnerable households, both now and also in terms of the demographic for the future. So the fact that sort of flats in urban areas tend to be the customers of heat networks. We've got continued support for the workforce in transitioning to these jobs that we think will come forward as part of the plan, as a result of the plan. Continued support for the installer workforce to transition from being gas engineers to being heat pump engineers, and the Warm Homes Skills programme around energy efficiency and fabric measures. The Minister is working with the TUC on some of the issues around that, and very much learning from the work that has been done, although the sectors are quite different, in, for example, on offshore wind. I'm sure we'll get into discussion today, but thinking particularly beyond this Parliament, what we want to do is to put in place the architecture that makes a greater focus on local delivery the norm, and we want to work with DNOs, local authorities, with the emergent principles and practices around spatial planning to make that a reality. And this is where some of the capital lending that I talked about earlier might come into play as well. So I couldn't talk today without giving the less positive side of the last few weeks. So we published the Warm Homes Plan on Wednesday, I think I had there was 24 hours of solely positive coverage, and then the PAC published their latest report on the issues around solid wall insulation in eco and GBIS. I think we can't think about implementation and delivery of the plan without considering that backdrop and all the issues of consumer trust that actually are more deep-rooted than these recent examples, serious though they are. And we are very much working with certification bodies, with the likes of Trustmark, MCS, both to respond, to identify and respond and remediate those properties, but also to put in place longer-term reform so that the trust that we've been talking about is not put at risk in the future. So just a summary of what we're trying to achieve in high-level terms. So yes, it's about bringing people's bills down. It's also about decarbonising and mitigating climate change. It's also about improving energy security, so moving away from the volatility of gas markets and the economic co-benefits that I talked about earlier. So this is the slide that I thought you might be more interested in. It's really our next steps through to the end of the Parliament and 2030. You can see the big deadlines around implementation of MEES, and then working back some of the policy steps and the engagement that we intend to undertake, talking to people like you, to make sure that the programmes and policies contained in the plan are a success. So very much looking forward to getting into discussion about that both now and afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. So next, as I said, I'm introducing Abigail from Energy Saving Trust. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you, Andrej, and hello everyone. It's great to be here today, and thanks to NEA for inviting me to be on this panel and to celebrate the wonderful work you've been doing over the last 45 years. So I'm Abby Ward. I'm from Energy Saving Trust in the policy team, and for those of you who don't know who Energy Saving Trust are, we're an independent organisation with a mission to tackle the climate emergency, and we deliver programmes for national and local governments to support households, communities and businesses to take climate action. So on to my presentation today, and when I had a chat with Andrej a couple of weeks ago about this session, he asked me to think about what is next for the Warm Homes Plan now that we have the document. So I've picked out 3 key areas where I think that have been really promising to see in the plan, but where the detail is still a bit lacking, and as Jess has said, what some ideas might be to take them forward to ensure that we're really delivering what the ambition in the plan is. So those are relating to the Warm Homes Agency and its advice offering, links to the local power plan, which I know have been mentioned already, and then also a few learnings from Europe. So firstly, on the agency's advice offering, so as Jess outlined, one of the biggest announcements in the plan was the Warm Homes Agency, which was really welcome to see from us, as we've been strong advocates of the need for impartial tailored advice, particularly in England where there's been a postcode lottery to date. So it's really welcome that this was announced and has such a strong focus on consumer advice. But I guess where do we go from here? And from our experience delivering national and local advice services across the UK, there are some key things we'd like to see taken into account as the Warm Homes Agency develops its advice offering. So firstly, as has already been highlighted, we really want to see the provision of tailored advice to households, and speaks to kind of the lived experiences that's already been talked about today. But from the services that we deliver, we really know that one size really doesn't fit all, and we have to meet people where they are to take into account not only their property characteristics, but also the individual circumstances that they are living with. And that's crucial to build the trust and engagement from households that we need to really get things into people's homes to make them warmer. And we see that with Home Energy Scotland, which we run in Scotland on behalf of the Scottish Government, where consumers who speak to a HES advisor, 42% of them go on to install at least one energy efficiency, low carbon heat or renewable energy improvement, and then another 42% plan to in the next 12 months. There's a really high efficacy rate of giving people that tailored, personalised advice. And then obviously, as has been mentioned, the £5 billion for low-income households, it will be really important for households to know that they are eligible for them and how to access them so they can make those changes to their homes. Secondly is the need to provide the additional support, which again I know has been mentioned, but I just wanted to re-echo the importance of this that kind of goes beyond the digital first kind of model that the Warm Homes Agency is potentially taking on. And this is really key for households that a lot of people in this room will deal with who are in either complex to upgrade homes or who are vulnerable and are most likely to be in fuel poverty and may struggle to use digital channels. So it's really important that there is that additional support, whether that's by phone or particularly in person, to ensure that those households are getting the advice that they need and what they're going to respond to. And within this is also the importance of post-installation advice, which I know the hub was talking about, of the aftercare, which is also really key to ensure that people actually know how to use these technologies that will be unfamiliar to them, to ensure they're actually feeling the benefits of lower bills and warmer homes. So as has been said, the hand-holding support is really important. And again, point to Home Energy Scotland, where we have a programme called Energy Carers, who provide exactly that hand-holding support for households who have challenges, either whether it's related to health, disability, their family circumstances, but really need that extra support to make sure they can get the warmer home that they deserve. And then finally, I think it's really important for the agency to develop partnerships with existing local and national advice services, and it's kind of been alluded to, the collaboration is really important. And what we'd really like to see is the Warm Homes Agency being an infrastructure of advice where households contact the service and are directed via a simple referral pathway into local services that are already existing. So many have been already alluded to today, but there's also Home Energy Scotland in Scotland, Nest in Wales, and local one-stop shop services that combined authorities are starting to set up. So it's really important to ensure that where the advice is already there, that's where consumers are directed to, so that the agency can really focus on the areas that don't have the advice offering. And if we just think about combined authorities, for example, I think 60% of people in England are covered by a combined authority, but for those that aren't covered by a combined authority, what's the advice offering going to be for them if there's not one in their area already? So I think that's something that the agency can look to kind of fill the gap. Next was for the Warm Homes Agency and the Warm Homes Plan to think about the links to the local power plan, which instantly has come out today, but I have not managed to read yet. But it was great to see the local power plan mentioned in the Warm Homes Plan, and hopefully that's been reciprocated in today's publication. And I think it speaks to what's been said about making sure that the fuel poverty strategy and the Warm Homes Plan are aligned, and I think that should extend to the local power plan as well, because there's a real potential for community energy organisations and groups to support delivery of warm homes, and some are already doing this. So it will be really important to ensure that there's joined up thinking between these policies to ensure that community energy organisations are getting involved and really delivering warm homes in their area. And we know that community energy organisations are well placed, they have a strong understanding of their community, they can build trust and tailor messaging, and essentially they can bridge the link between national goals and delivery. And as has been said, there's a real focus on area-based delivery, which just lends into community energy organisation space, and there's lots of opportunities for community energy organisations to get involved in generating leads for local retrofit schemes, giving local tailored advice. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind as the Warm Homes Agency develops its offering. And then finally, as was alluded to, again, it was great to see in the Warm Homes Plan that the government are looking to look at international examples that have been successful. And as Jess said, we're a bit of an outlier in Europe as energy agencies are a common part of the energy policy landscape. And I also mentioned this as Energy Saving Trust are about to take over the presidency of a network called the European Energy Network, which does what it says on the tin, and it's a group of 24 energy agencies, both EU and non-EU members, and we think this is a real opportunity to tap into best practice, whether that's on advice, local delivery, fuel poverty schemes, and understand how different models work in Europe, as all 24 energy agencies have very different models that they operate under, whether they're closer to government or more arm's length. And I think there's a real opportunity to learn from some of the features of their energy agency and bring it into the UK as we kind of shape the Warm Homes Agency and get it up and running from next year. And yeah, that was the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Abby. And finally, Sara Edmonds. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So thank you so much for the invitation. I know we're all saying this, but I was genuinely looking forward to this conference. I just think it's exactly the kind of conversations that we need to be having, and wonderful timing as well with our Welcome Warm Homes plan. So yeah, the theme obviously is, will it deliver? My name is Sara Edmonds. I'm co-director of the National Retrofit Hub, and we're a community interest company. And our mission is essentially to do what we can to enable the local and equitable delivery of retrofit at scale. So who are we? We're a small team of 5 core members. We have our board, collaborators and group chairs, our advisory panel made up of our strategic partners and sponsors, of whom the NEA are one, as are the Energy Saving Trust, and our network. And if you're not connected to us, please do, and then maybe Rachel and I can look lovingly into your eyes as well. So this is just a list of who our partners and sponsors are. I'm pretty sure that's not the most up-to-date one, so if you're a partner and you're not there, apologies. So will the Warm Homes plan deliver? Will it hit the target, or will it miss its mark? And I think it's a lot of targets that we're going to be able to achieve together collectively. But we're more interested in what it will deliver. So our research tells us that whilst there is significant retrofit activity across the sector, the data suggests a real need to identify metrics. Yes, I am going to read it all, just bear with me. For both measuring retrofit and quantifying what successful retrofit looks like. What does that mean? Programs should resonate with the needs of people, and we should measure what matters. And that kind of sounds obvious, but I think there are some big gaps in that, and this is the focus of some of our work of late. So this challenge theme emerged from this report that we published in 2024. Hopefully the QR code will work. It often doesn't. So you might find this report you will find this report on our resources page on our website if you can't work that. And it was a number of things had emerged from that report, but the real issue around measuring outcomes and impact evaluation was the most important sort of theme that emerged from that. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. So what the Warm Homes plan gets right from our perspective and in talking to our network, there's obviously a clear commitment to improving homes. There's the recognition of health and comfort, and that's the one I do want to come back on. There is the focus on simplifying delivery and consumer protection that we've heard about, and the support for rapid deployment where homes are ready. Now, where we would like to support further, and we've been discussing this with our advisory panel and network, but we'd like to help move beyond the first phase of home upgrades. And we want to turn that place-based ambition into practice and action. We want to help define measuring success in practice. We want to ensure quality and performance over the long term, and to support a diverse supply chain, particularly with the consolidation of the way that some of the grant funding will be delivered. And we really, really are so keen on this last one. That doesn't sound like very much, but clarity on system enabling investment, and I'm going to come back to that as well. So bear with me while I teach you to suck eggs. But what is retrofit? If you take any of these words in the green box and kind of mush them around, you probably have that in your definition of what retrofit is. And for the eagle-eyed amongst you, that is the diagram from the Warm Homes plan that describes the kind of measures that are going to be of the focus. The recovering architect in me is slightly triggered by the way the insulation is warming the attic, but you can find me for a coffee later and we'll get over that. No shade, by the way. But is that the whole story? Is that the whole story? Is it just about upgrading our homes? And I think several speakers have talked about the fact that retrofit is about people. We know that poor housing drives ill health and inequality. We know that retrofit success is generally judged by narrow technical metrics, and there are reasons for that. We know that policy focus on compliance and not so much on lived experience, which has been discussed a lot today. We know that health impacts vary by place, tenure, and structural inequities. And we know that policy and programs often miss what matters to individuals and communities, not through lack of intent, but because of its very nature. Policy has to be flat-bottomed to meet the broadest population. So it's our job to make sure that when policy lands in a place, it sticks. And this is where we need to be talking about what we can do to meet the ambition of the Warm Homes Plan. So what does matter to people? Well, I don't need to tell you this either, but warmer and cooler homes, cheaper to run homes, environments that don't damage our health, no mold and damp, housing stability and quality, and that's really important, and I'm really pleased to hear the emphasis on the private rental sector. And all of that in thriving communities, because all of these things are held and directly tied to healthier bodies and minds. So what I want to do is just sort of talk about how we as the National Retrofit Hub would work in order to help shift that dial. So to do that, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the way that we work. So as I said earlier, we try to enable the local and equitable delivery of retrofit at scale. So we do this large part through convening. We do an awful lot of talking. I love a good chat. But we do a lot of bringing people together because our power is in our network. The knowledge and the expertise, as has been mentioned today, is in this room amongst all of you. But bringing it together is the bit that had been missing when we first were established in 2023. We were established to be the glue between the parts. So we try and coordinate efforts, and we try and connect and amplify the sector, and we try to showcase best practice, and we try to deliver those insights from that work with our network. And we do that through our 6 working groups, and we have been producing an awful lot of the outputs through those working groups over the last couple of years, but without a desire to create silos of our own. So we also have 6 cross-cutting themes, because the themes that you see here pop up time and again, whether you're talking about delivery or finance or skills. And from that previous report that I mentioned, our State of the Nation, where we naively thought, let's just have a little look at delivery and it'll take us 2 weeks and it'll be a 2-pager, and it was 9 months and a 54-page report. So we know that there's a lot of things that need to be examined and to move forward. And just before you publish the Warm Homes Plan, like by a day, we published this health, place and retrofit. So you might not have seen it in your anticipation and waiting for the Warm Homes Plan. But what this report essentially tries to talk about is the fact that we need to broaden how success in retrofit is defined. We need to do that by measuring real-world outcomes, not just predictions. And we need to support communities to shape and assess the outcomes. And we know this because we know that health matters. And I don't need to tell any of you about the £1.4 billion it costs the NHS to address issues of people suffering in poor housing. But we also know that 79% of the benefits are social or co-benefits from trying to make this move to a just transition. So we know that there are a lot of these issues that are where our focus ought to be, but where has our focus been? And it tends to be a little on the carbon tunnel syndrome. Like, it's understandable because climate change is our reckoning, but it's not only, we can't only focus on the carbon, we do have to focus on other things. And I read a report recently about how we are in global water bankruptcy. I mean, it's a real concern. So what would success look like? So we continued to pull on that thread that we found in our State of the Nation report and said, well, yes, carbon, yes, fuel poverty, yes, measures installed. That is important, but it's not the whole picture. It's not the whole picture, and until we start to really integrate what all of those things that matter to people really are, we won't scale in the way that we need to scale by bringing everybody with us and leaving nobody behind. So we have to consider things like biodiversity, community, wealth, job creation, happiness, imagine. So the research question was, how can broader outcome measurement accelerate retrofit delivery and be designed to drive better policy funding and delivery decisions, particularly to maximise co-benefits like health and equity? And we think those are really, really important. Yes, it's £15 billion, but it's still a fiscally constrained environment, and I don't think Jess would pretend that 15 billion is going to cover everybody, but it's a damn good start, and we need to do right by it. We need to honour that investment and do what we can to ensure that the right outcomes are met for people. So these are the outputs that that project that culminated in that report, Health, Place and Retrofit, delivered. And I'm putting these here just to show you that the kind of outputs that we create, the ones here on, what's that, my right? Never mind, this one here, we did some innovator profiling. So we speak to our network, we speak to people and we say, like, who's out there innovating? Who's already looking at better outcomes measurement? We're not going to create that. We're going to look to our network to see who's doing that and to showcase that. So there's 4 or 5 innovator profiles, and they're not the only ones, but they're the ones that we had the time to speak to. And our job here is to socialize those with our network. So we give you a shortcut to understand when you're working in delivery, what can you use to go above and beyond. We also showcase all of the insights from our various stakeholder workshops. So if we ask for your time and you're good enough to give it to us, we will tell your peers what you said to us, unless of course you don't want us to. And then we've got our baselining tool where we looked at what all of the schemes are measuring and also, crucially, what they're not measuring, and in that find the opportunity to expand and measure things more successfully. And I'm really excited about this, the role of community health impact assessments in retrofit. And I'll conclude almost now by saying that, as I mentioned, with policy needing by necessity of reaching the whole population to be flat-bottomed, when it lands in a place, it needs to know, the place needs to be able to speak to policy. And if we don't understand what place-based data looks like and how to collate it beyond the publicly available data sets, then we're going to miss the mark. So a community health impact assessment is one methodology to work with communities to ensure that the nuance of that place is understood, codified, and interacts with policy. So that's a workbook. It's going to be a practical tool. It will be published in a couple of weeks, and we're going to have a webinar to tell you how you can use it. So the vital enabling infrastructure that we think our role is, and we hope that you can work with us at the same time to do this, is to ensure that fabric, ventilation and sequencing remain crucial, that local authority capacity for strategy design and delivery is supported, supply chain diversity and SME inclusion need to be protected, consumer protection and advice infrastructure remain deal breakers, and it will all live or die without the trust ecosystems. So don't forget, don't be afraid of the small, and don't put undue trust in the big. Small is beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So we're going to get questions from the floor. So if you put your hand up, we've got the roving mics. Come on, don't be shy. Just, I was thinking that pie chart of the multiple benefits, that could become more relevant, potentially, sort of thinking cynically or politically. You know, you may have to appeal to different views in different areas from a political perspective, and therefore having a greater armory of benefits helps in that regard, because not everyone will have carbon tunnel vision. No questions? That's incredible. Thank you, Sam.
Always got a question. Hello?
Yep.
There we go. Area-based retrofit sounds absolutely amazing in principle. I don't know how long we had Flex in Eco for, but 12 years maybe. We still had councils at the end of that 12-year period not engaging with it at all. What does the government think it's going to do to make sure that we don't further grow the postcode lottery, where active councils are really, really benefiting their residents, while inactive ones are just being held further behind?
Do you want to start?
Is that for me?
Yeah, inevitably.
Thank you for the question, and I sort of recognise the observation about EcoFlex. It had grown during the period of Eco4, but had it reached its potential? I'm not quite sure. I think, so what we want to do in moving to a single low-income fund is to bring together the experience from the capital programmes that are delivered through local authorities and housing associations, as well as the experience from ECO. And we want to open it up so that it to a broader tenure base. And then in terms of the support for local areas, I think this is an area where the agency will have a role. So we've already got the trailblazers in places like the Midlands and West Midlands and Greater Manchester. There's obviously the move to integrated settlements, and we need to bring those together for those areas that are ready to go further. But one of the roles of the agency will be to ensure that there's a sort of base case for other areas that are not as far progressed. It's always difficult when you talk about, is a postcode lottery just the other side of local devolution or sort of empowerment? It's quite a difficult balance, all of that, isn't it? But we sort of recognise the issue that you describe. And we also recognise the sort of need for capacity building at a local level and the funding to enable that. That's not surprised to hear that that's something that's raised with us very regularly.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, this way, yes. David, thank you.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, David from Rockwell. Just thinking about the numbers that you were talking about around the different strands. Obviously, there's perhaps a little bit less of fuel poor than there were in the last Parliament, but there's been a big expansion for able to pay and other strands. I'm just thinking, given that in the past some of these kind of loan schemes and things have been undersubscribed, is the department thinking about ways that, let's say you get to the end of the fiscal year, instead of having to kind of send it back to the Treasury, you might be able to switch some of these funds between strands, and maybe the fuel poor strand might be able to benefit from that?
Should we get another question? I think, was there someone next to...
There's a lady in the third, fourth
row.
Yes,
let's have another question and then do it that way.
Hello, panel. Great session. My name's Catherine. I work for Cadent, who's part of the gas network group across the country. And I'm really interested in one of the big changes that you identified with local empowerment being a big part of the scheme. And I just wonder where you see the role of the energy industry in talking about supplier obligation shifting to local authority. Where do you see the value add for the energy industry going forward in the delivery of the plan?
Again, for probably both of those for Jess, but also, Sarah, you might have reflections given some of your partners and what, in your work, what they've said about the sort of local engagement as well.
Yeah, okay. I'll take both together. I mean, on the balance between able to pay and low income, even within £15 billion, there are quite difficult choices to make just because of the scale of capital investment needed. And then sort of what we really want to do, obviously, is to leverage in other sources of finance. And that's part of what the regulations will do. They are going to require private sector landlords to invest in their properties. So it sort of increases the scale of funding available. We are always constrained by Treasury rules about carryover between years and between different schemes. We also continue to sort of push them on that to enable the best value for money. And then I would say that some of the questions are not yet resolved. So I talked earlier about the call for evidence on the use of this lending for government, from government. That is potentially really quite a flexible source of investment into the sector. So I would just sort of, again, encourage people to come forward with ways in which they think that might work. For example, people have been talking to us about whether we can quantify the avoided network costs, and that could be a source of making these projects break even. On the question about the energy industry, we absolutely see an ongoing role for all parts of the industry. So we're very conscious that suppliers are energy suppliers are the sort of route in for most consumers to these questions. So thinking about, again, like the finance offering, for example, lots of suppliers have their own offer at the moment alongside solar and heat pumps, but we know that they're often loss leaders or sort of constrained in scale. And what we want to do is grow that market, working with the suppliers. And then sort of further up the infrastructure chain, we absolutely want that both the electricity, gas networks to be part of this local planning, particularly thinking sort of 10, 20 years further ahead into the transition as we move from sort of individual houses into the sort of large-scale transition that's needed. You've got to be part of the thinking.
Yeah, what's been swimming around in my head when the different questions have been coming in, and I think we're quite focused in the National Retrofit Hub about looking at what place-based approaches means. I think they quite often get interchanged with area-based delivery and place-based approaches, and I think there is a need for increasing literacy and clarifying with consensus the definition around what those things are, because and happily, we're knee-deep in some research about that we can share in time. And I think what is important in that, and it was sort of what I was alluding to at the end about not underestimating the small, and I think when we're talking about area-based delivery and what the role is for everybody, because there is a role for everybody, it's understanding that community groups and sort of third sector organisations can often be overlooked and underestimated. And I would say that that's a real risk that we need to avoid. And thankfully, I haven't either read the local power plan as it was sent to me this morning, but there is a need for us to understand what we can collectively organise around now. We have a live programme at the moment called Retrofit Connect that we'll be sharing a little bit more about. And we're working with 9 community asset developers and innovators. And I'm calling them that because quite often when you call community groups, and because they are that, but quite often when you refer to community groups, lots of people will just sort of say, yeah, it's the knitting group at the corner, that's lovely, but what are they going to do? And it's not that. It's the deep wisdoms and knowledges that people hold in places that can be absolutely the game changer between whether or not a policy and a programme could be delivered at scale, because you have those existing trust networks. So with area-based planning and sort of local area planning and devolved settlements and things like that, without ensuring that those voices are in the room when it comes to strategic planning and role identification, we will miss the opportunity to reach beyond what the initial capital investment can deliver. So I think it's just important for us that we all don't sort of just grab a hold of like, oh yeah, area-based delivery, that's this. Like, what does it mean? Who has what role? It will change place to place, and we need to be responsible with the burden of responsibility on different shoulders. It doesn't mean that, and it's the question somebody brought up earlier on about governance. We need to make sure there's governance and accountability in those things, and often the trust network holders are also the people that you need to be bringing in for the governance and accountability.
Also, can I just add on the loans question? I think we've seen, particularly in England, there's been kind of high street banks that have done kind of loan offerings that haven't been too successful. So I think, I'm not sure what it looks like yet, but I think there is a role for the agency to make sure that consumers are aware of what finance offers are on offer and get that independent impartiality before kind of embarking on taking out a loan, and just having a link between the agency and what's on offer in the private sector. Because obviously there might be kind of quite a few offerings that are coming from banks, etc. So I think there is a role there to really coordinate what's on offer for consumers and work out what might be best for them and which kind of suppliers might be best for them.
Thank you. Any more? Oh, yes. Taz.
Hello. So my question is in regards to failed retrofit. So we've obviously heard the stories of the horrors of the past. I'm quite passionate because I live in Fishwick and there's over 1,000 houses and there's little Fishwicks all over the country. So as part of the plan, what's next for them? And because of the issues that they live with on a daily basis, which impacts both mental health, their own health, as well as the community itself, looking at accountability and how does accountability come into it, because it appears that there's been no accountability from organisations that are supposed to be doing the governance. How do we, A, fix that problem, And going forward, how does that support those in regards to compliance and governance? And what should be, if houses aren't completed to a high standard, what should be the accountability provision for them?
I think that's for me as well. Yes. Thank you very much for the question. And as I said in my presentation, the context of poor quality work absolutely sort of sits with us in everything that we're doing on the Warm Homes Plan. It's completely unavoidable. And we have to have in mind the impact that it's having on those households, as well as what we're trying to do in the future. And I sort of made light of it earlier, but sort of that isn't a difference that you'll hear between what I say and what the Minister says. It is absolutely sort of forefront of their minds. So, really specifically, there is a programme of audit and remediation. We call it Find and Fix, of the households that have had external wall insulation under Eco4 and GBIS. That is progressing, and we're seeing good progress in remediation where the audits have taken place. And we're also seeing higher levels of take-up of the audits than in the earlier phases, which is sort of goes to the trust issues that we've been talking about, and we're very pleased to see. We are following the model that the installer has to put the work right at no cost to the consumer. There are a specific number of instances where that isn't true, and Fishwick is one of them. And we are very much sort of in dialogue with people like NEA and working through sort of what can be done there. And then the questions of accountability go to what I was saying about reform of the overall system. It is clear that the sort of system of oversight that we thought was in place failed, and we have to work to reform that system whilst taking action for the households that have been affected to date. So it's, again, it's a cliche, but kind of building the plane while you're flying it, sort of reforming the system whilst ensuring that a system with much tighter oversight from us day to day continues to function in the sort of short to medium term.
Can I add just a little? At the risk of throwing my hat in the ring already, I think this is a question around what we would like to see the Warm Homes Agency having front and centre in it, and what should be one step removed from it. And I think things like, there's lots of conversations going around, like the Federation of Master Builders talking about licensing, and there's lots of good ideas that are being rigorously examined between the numerous parties that you must be discussing with and our network as well. But things like licensing and certification and redress and like high level generic kind of, this is your one line of truth sort of stuff, we believe should be front and centre in the Warm Homes Agency, but then endorsing local advice and endorsing what already is working well where there is trust in communities. That bit of that relationship, I think, will really, really matter. And why I'm bringing this up in relation to your question is because what you want to have is, maybe this is the Irish Catholic in me, but you want to have the fear of God. We've gotten a bit personal now, haven't we? You want to have the fear of God. It shouldn't be 3 strikes and you're out. One and done. And you need to know, we all need to know that the Warm Homes Agency is strong enough to back that up, to back that kind of claim up, and then to have your reputation on the line because you're relying on local delivery. And I think those two things and the balance between those two is going to be really, really important moving forward, not to forget about the situations that have already happened in the past, but I think that's going to be super important.
Thank you. So we are now nearly 25 seconds over, which is not too bad. So thank you to the panel. We've got lunch coming up, but if you just bear with me, because Big Chris is just going to tell you where you're going after.
Well, thank you for that. I will hold my...
Tall, I meant tall.
Yes, I will continue to try hold my stomach in for the next 30 minutes. I find myself uniquely placed, actually, at conference that it's myself that's the barrier to lunch. So rest assured, this will be a quick update. Usual stuff around social media. I've had some younger colleagues smugly coming and telling me that actually Twitter is no more and it's actually X. So please be aware of that should you be looking at Twitter. Exhibition, again, please go and visit the exhibition. That's really a paramount importance. We've got our fantastic conference sponsors as well, e-vouchers, Northern Gas Networks, Northern Power Grid and OVO. The session for this afternoon is breakout sessions. I won't go into too much detail because it's all on your lanyards and your conference plans, but they're all in Stage 1, Stage 2, Barber West and Barber East. Again, all information is provided and there's always NEA staff available if you need that. A little bit of an important, serious message for the sessions after the 3:15 break. We've got a breakout session in Stage 1. One of it is a spotlight session, which is a day in the life of an advisor with our colleague Rebecca Maddock. And we've also got Little Lives, Big Struggle, the hidden toll of fuel poverty on children. And the serious bit is that potentially this session may well contain some information that has a toll on what fuel poverty is on children. So it will potentially cover sensitive topics. So just be aware that it may be upsetting, but it's the real reality of fuel poverty, in particular with children. So just please self-control in terms of if you feel that you might have issues with some of the content within that. Just be aware that that might be the case. Apart from that, enjoy your lunch. Thank you very much.